there are a few things you need. A, you need a screenshot.
Take the time to edit and review what you wrote, because what's
Yes.
the point in writing something if the person you're writing it to isn't going to be able to comprehend it?
Our jobs as developers isn't to write code. It is to solve problems.
Why do people make so much money? Because they're the best communicators. It's very hard to explain what I mean when I say I don't understand what you mean. Here we are at episode 5 of the Code and Character podcast. And today we're going to be talking about communication and our experiences with communication in the workplace and in tech, particularly with a focus on written communication, but that's not the be all and end all. I'm sure we'll cover some other things as we go forward. As we mentioned last week, Ivan and you and I have had a bit of a conversation in prep for this, so we've got some ideas about things we'll talk about. As we start, I'll hand it over to you. We'll start on a positive note, I guess. What some good communication experiences you've had?
Yeah, well, good communication really comes down to, of course, explaining what you want in a written form, kind of like water is wet. Of course, that kind of, that's what good communication skills are all about. Now, I've worked at many places over the years, and the thing about good communication is that it stops you from asking for more information because you have the information already available. You don't have to ask for more information. So you might have situations where, and this is something we were talking about earlier today, and that is when you're dealing with, say, bugs. Okay, a client or a QA team is saying there's a problem on the website. There are a few things you need. A, you need a screenshot, preferably the whole browser, so you can see the URL.
The URL, yeah.
That's number one.
Yep.
2 is also how to replicate it. That's important because I can look at something and be like, all right, I've got this little tiny screenshot. You're saying this isn't broken. So what's it meant to? How is it meant to work?
Yeah.
So things like
the thing is broken, make it good.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Make it pop. That's the good old one. And the place that I've been working at for like the last year or so, their QA team is very good, and they actually have things which makes perfect sense. But you have actual results and expected results. So so straight away you might be thinking, okay, so how's it actually meant to work? Or sometimes just going through the ticket or the email, you're kind of like figuring out, wait, so is this part of the problem? Isn't this part of the problem? But if everything is broken out nicely, expected results, it's meant to work like this, but this is the actual results, then straight away, like, okay, that gives you so much information. Also, as I mentioned, steps to replicate, because that's the first thing I do.
Yeah.
For me as a developer, straight away, I need to know which platform it's broken on and how do I replicate it. So then I can quickly go and check it, because that's the first thing I do.
I'm very about that. As a developer, when I get given a bug, I don't want to spend the first 90% of the time working on that bug, figuring out what the bug is.
Yes.
Pretty much.
Absolutely.
I agree with. I like that format of replicating steps. I do have to say, I do like that in. Let's go. We're both Drupal people. The Drupal issue queue, for example, has a recommended format which seems to be easily accessible. Off the top of my head, I don't know where to find it, but I know that when I open issues, it tends to get used a lot. And when that state problem, how do you resolve it? There's a template structure on their Drupal issue queues for that, which is fantastic. One of the things I want to say about that Drupal community is that there are lots of good cases for communication. I think generally people care about it. In our industry, we often come from the case of good communication being don't be rude and don't upset people and don't make them, which is good, and be open and do things, the replication steps. But I on my other stand, I think there does tend to be a bit of a lacking of make it clear for people that aren't as technically proficient as you is, things like assume knowledge. It's such an easy trap to fall into. That's one of the things I think happens a lot, is it's very easy to turn around and, I'll get into some examples, but when you're deep in the nitty gritty on a technical issue, just to have an assumption that what you're writing, the person reading your comments got a full background on the entire issue, and you're like, things. It's because we didn't invalidate cache, and you're like, but the context, you didn't invalidate it by hand in a test like it's when someone's coming in the middle, they come in without context. I think it happens a lot. So I do want to say there's a lot of good things about communication that happen. I mean, there's a lot of good communicators in our industry. You go to conferences and talks and meetups, and people present and they talk very clearly and they explain things very well. But when it comes to, I think it's in the daily grind, when it comes to the daily business, when people are busy and they're in a hurry and they want to get something solved really fast, and they go ba 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 and shoot send, and the person receiving that then reads it, when instead of having clarity, they've got 1,000 questions. And ironically, it slows everybody down. You're trying to save time, but then everybody's always spending time. Well, I say it personally. I've mentioned it before. I might have issues with comprehension sometimes and completely understanding, and maybe not grabbing context and having to do mental calisthenics to make connections between things. I'd rather it all be spelled out. And when I get given, I don't like being given a puzzle when I can fix the bug. I don't want finding out what the bug is to be the puzzle.
Yeah, absolutely. But one thing I know of experience, when people ask for help on my videos, you get a varying range of comments, such as very ambiguous comments. They're like that are totally pretty much off topic, but kind of relevant to the video. And I need to really pick my battles, because it's like, am I going to sit here and try and explain to somebody like why they should use Drupal? Like, they might chuck in, all right, this is great, but why should I use Drupal? And it's like,
I
don't know. Yeah, that's very, but the thing is though, that's a very ambiguous, like, okay, you want to, I don't know, like, how do you answer that? And so, but if there's a very specific question, then I will answer it. And one thing that I remember reading about, and I probably mentioned it in one of our first podcasts, probably. Anyway, there was I don't know where I learned it, but it is part of some type of guide for one of the open source projects. And it recommends that when you reply, you always start with a yes. Like, yes, you've looked in the right places. Because imagine you ask a question and you're a newbie and somebody's like, you're looking in the wrong place. What you've done is wrong, blah, blah, blah. But instead of that, you start off on a positive by saying, yes, you are going in the right direction. You can just chuck something in there. It just sets the tone straight away of being a much nicer experience. Whereas like, yes, you're going in the right direction. But this also comes down to, and this is one thing I've learned, is that, and maybe this is just my experience of writing online, I can kind of anticipate the questions that I get. Even when I write blog posts and do videos, I can guarantee you there's certain questions that I'm going to get. So when I try and ask questions, I actually put in there straight away and say, look, I have cleared the cache. I have Googled this particular term, because the last thing you want is somebody to say, have you Googled it? It's like,
that's in when things take time. I think when communication is like, you put up a question, you wait 3 days, and someone comes back with, did you Google it?
Yeah, I know.
You're like 3 days later, you're like, hey, like, yeah.
So that is such a useless, absolute question. Absolutely.
I do think it's great, because some of these are very seemingly commonsensical things. In preparation for today, I was doing a bit of research, and I did go, it occurred to me, Drupal has to have some communication guidelines. There's no possible way it doesn't. And I went and researched that a bit and looked some of them up. And I did find some documentation very much in line with what you just spoke about. There was, at first, a lot of it was first, it's etiquette, how to ask good questions, like I mentioned to you earlier before we had this conversation about the don't ask to ask, just ask, which is a great tip for in chat. Just if you got a question, just ask the question. Don't ask if it's okay to ask the question first. It's a great, great tip. And a lot of it was aimed at newbies and how to ask help and how to seek for help. it took me a while to find anything that was how to offer that help.
Yeah.
And some of it was really quite good. I was really quite impressed with some of it, even though it was still basic. But it was there's a couple of blog posts here, which there's one like the gentle what's this called? The Gentle Art of Patch Review, which I think is a great title, written by Sage Sharp in 2014.
Oh,
And it's got interesting things like the newcomer's perspective, the maintainer's perspective, and it's got some nice stuff about how to go through it. And it's sort of, I want to go over one of the scenarios I read today. Now that I remember it, was that there's a tendency to answer the questions answer the reviews from people that you understand. And when newbies come through, you sort of, as a maintainer, you tend to put them off because you've got to come back to them. And then you leave it for a while, and then you pick up all the beginners reviews and you go through them and you go, well, your coding standards are wrong. You wrote it in the wrong test. You did this wrong. This is in the wrong spot. This is wrong. And she's really suggested just drop all that. Look, they're new. Start with simple things like what you got. Is it a good or bad idea what their solution is? Like, just start at the architectural level. Is the architectural implementation they've put in there actually going to work? Right. And then you can come back and go at that point, because otherwise you've got this new person who's done everything they can to try and do a good job, waited for ages, and then you've come back with this big list of criticisms. And I thought that was great insight. I thought that was fantastic. But it was really good to see a nice little article written for the maintainer. Like, this is how you can give feedback. And I love that it's from that newbie's perspective, because that's very much where I come from a lot on the communication. I do it in my code too. I'm sort of like, give it from a Drupal perspective. But if I'm a new person to Drupal, I'm experienced in PHP, I've been coding for years, I don't particularly know Drupal, I want to help out, I open an issue. We talked about one, I've got the example here today. It's a critical issue, has been open since 2015. It's stalled. I suspect it's stalled because the communication's slowing down. But you want as many people to help as possible. And then you read the description at the top, and it's well structured. It's nice. It's following the format. But then you get remaining tasks, and it's got #142, #444. Which means, okay, I'm in the middle of reading the description. I want to know what the remaining tasks are. I can help with those. Scroll down through 100 comments to 144. And then you get the 144, and it goes, I fixed the patch in 139. Scroll up to 139, read the patch, come back down, and then you read another one, and it's sort of like, I made the test, it failed as expected. You go, the test was expected to fail? It's because we didn't invalidate the caches. In the patch, when you ran the test, in the environment, in the fix, in the, and that's sort of one of those, and particularly this example I had when it goes, where is that example I've got here? It's got an error. They've output the test error, and it goes, that's after enabling the filter. I assume you mean you got the error after you enabled the filter. Again, in the test, in the context is missing.
Yes. Yeah.
And there's other case shenanigans. You go, okay, and the body field doesn't reappear. What? It's like, here I am, I'm trying to find out what the remaining task is on this thing, and I'm here in puzzle land, and that's it's all like that. It's polite, it's all help. It's all an attempt to be helpful, and there's no one being rude or accusatory or anything, which seems to be where a lot of the guidelines are aimed at, how to be nice and how to be gentle and not. But there's not, apart from laying out templates, there's not a lot on how to actually use your words. Probably the way to want to use your word like that. So I'm a big one on that. Just when what do we call it? Vague pronouns, this and that. This is because that was, and you're just like, what's this? Like, it's kind of, where I would put it, that error occurred after we enabled the filter in the test, is much clearer than that's after enabling the filter.
Yes. Yeah.
That's my particular one of the things, but that's I've said it before. I think I said it last week. Often when I read things, I don't know what you're talking about. And this is a classic example. That's why I've gone and sorted it out and gone, this is what I mean by I don't know what you're talking about. It's because I don't know what you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
If I'd understand it if you explained what it, it's kind of, I'm just lost. And and the same thing when you're sitting here and you've got to spare half an hour, you go, I might go help this thing. And it's like after an hour, you go, okay, I'm still in the middle of trying to figure out what the remaining task is. And then my hour's gone.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
I think when it comes to contributing, that is part of the process. And I think it's up to you to decide. And I'm not saying you, I just mean general, you, all of us. We are all driven by when we contribute, it has to be in code. But in actual fact, half of the effort is understanding what the ticket is about, what the bug is about. And you might spend an hour, but you'll get a better understanding of the ticket. And then the next time around, you will also then be able to jump into it straight away. That is why there is a lot of emphasis on ticket triaging as well. I know.
Oh yeah,
that's been. There's a few people in the community in Australia that I know that do it, and just organizing it, because it's a hard thing. And to come back to your question early on, maybe I need to jump in there to stop the Bevan rants. Anyway, no, that's the whole point of this podcast. But to answer your question about, you mentioned that this stuff seems like common sense. It does after it's been explained.
Yes.
So I know what I do. Like whenever I start a new contract, because I jump around contracts a lot, I kind of gauge in the beginning, especially if I work with BAs, like business analysts, depending the type of project that I'm on. But sometimes I have a BA that's not that that they don't understand Drupal, but they understand writing technical documents. And they often test things out to see, okay, does this ticket match the definition of done? And blah, blah, blah. And they might come back and say, this is wrong. Okay, well, all right, let's go through this process. And I actually sit them down for like the first time whenever I go through it.
Mm-hmm.
And I take them through the process and I tell them exactly what I need. So I need to know, okay, where was this, like, if everyone's going to be writing acceptance criteria and it's all written, I want to know where that acceptance criteria is, just in case I have missed something. Then how I replicate it. Also, what environment you're testing on. Also, if you're going to take screenshots, try and take screenshots of a lot of other things, because context plays a huge part. I want to know because by taking a screenshot of your browser, I know which browser you're using, which OS you're using, which website you're using, environment, little things like that. And yeah, once it's explained, it's like, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. But it just needs to be explained.
Some of my experience is not like that. I can explain it till the cows come home and people just keep doing it. And you're like, this is tiring.
Well, that's
I've asked you for
that's just part of corporate life.
So many goddamn time. And you're still sending me a shot of a button and said this button's in the wrong spot. And you're like, what button is that? Where's it from?
Relative to what?
That's no idea.
Yeah.
Let me do all the research for you. That it's one of those. If all you did was take the whole screenshot, I wouldn't have any of these questions. It's one of those. I've had that happen so many times, and I think there is something to. I don't tend to agree though. This issue I kind of come through. I've run out of time. I've run out of steam. By the time I come back to it, I'm still none the wiser of. I've run out of time when I'm halfway through understanding it. I'm going to drop it, right? I'm just going, I haven't got time for that. But we are talking about communication, and I think that's where some of those tips are. That's why I bring those up, because it's the point of communication is clear. What's that old, the 3 C's? Clear, concise communication. And, I know, to be honest with myself, one of my flaws is to just write way too much. Right, give way too much context, because I've got, you see me, I side on the fact of I hate it when there's not context, and I overconcept by supplying everything, including the kitchen sink in there, right? Which I need to learn. There's often such a focus on keeping things short, but when you cut out information you need, I don't consider that concise anymore. That's vague. But there's an art to this, and what I'm trying to encourage is, hey, I came up with that term this morning with the help of ChatGPT. What's that? Culture of clarity. I think it's just I know for myself, I'm always trying to be clear, and I fail many, 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 many times. But I know for myself, like when we're working in this industry, you got time constraints, you're stressed, you're in a hurry, you're busy trying to solve 100 different bugs all at the same time, and you're like, throw something out, and I'm just like, my personal opinion is stop. Take the time to edit and review what you wrote, because what's the
Yes.
point in writing something if the person you're writing it to isn't going to be able to comprehend it? You've just wasted your own time and theirs, and you know, but then I see these issue queues and other people come across and then comment on these things, but I think they're also inherently intimately involved in the process. It's a bug that they've taken over under their shoulders. They've been working on a regular process. They may have better communication skills and comprehension skills, and they're working with it. But in my opinion, you've raised the barrier of entry, right? There are other people you can help, and it's not an accusatory, it's not an attitudinal gatekeeping. It's gatekeeping by default, just because of a habit of language. You've shut the gate on people that probably have the skills and understanding to come and help, if they could get past that first barrier of comprehending what actually is going on, right? That's and I think there's so much about communication. Like that's Vin Yang does all these public speaking and talks about why do people make so much money, because they're the best communicators.
Yeah.
That's the thing. And I think there's something just to be said for communication. I care about it a lot. I tend to suspect I care about clear communication because I struggle with ambiguity. I've been saying that for many, many years. If something's ambiguous, it's a fault of mine. It's a flaw of mine. If it's ambiguous, I'm stuck.
Yeah.
It's a bit of maybe a confidence issue, maybe a vague thing, but it's like I take one look at it and go, that could mean about 4 or 5 different things.
Yeah.
Brain fry, I'm done, right? It's kind of I don't know. And the same thing, and it's that same when we're so busy and we're busy solving 10 other problems, I don't need that. Right. And it's for me, it's the friction. Let's open it up. Let's encourage things. It's a rant of mine. I've said it so many times. I don't like words like this and that. And I find it so hard to explain when it's like, I don't understand this. I don't understand that. I literally mean, I don't understand this in inverted commas. And when you say this, I don't know what you mean by this. Right? And I find that very hard to, that's one of those ambiguities too. It's communication is hard. I mean, as I heard a quote years ago of someone said, the efficiency of communication between human beings is so bad, it's surprising we manage to communicate at all. And I think that's true, right? And then so when you don't put any effort in, it's kind of so that's I err on the side of I try and be as clear and as possible, and not always. I know I'm imperfect. I know sometimes I've got typos. I know I've sent stuff in Slack where I've put typos in there and come back later and gone, how the hell did anyone understand what I wrote?
Yeah.
And sometimes I don't bother fixing them because I know I've made that assumption. Oh, they'll be able to figure it out. And that's what I like to pull myself up onto. But I'm like, if I'm thinking that, then there are other people thinking that. It's like, oh yeah, no, I wasn't clear, but it's all right. They'll be able to figure it out. So will they?
Well, yeah.
So,
well, I think we can all come to an agreement that communication's a skill. Okay.
Yes.
And I do think, and I remember hearing about this ages ago, that that actual language and communication between humans, when it was developed, long time ago, that is a form of technology that we developed ourselves, that our brains developed ourselves, because then we were able to pass information around to other people, and then that actually allowed us to progress as a species. So I think it's good that we can communicate, but it also takes skill. It takes a lot of skill, and it's also very domain specific. I would also say, like, you have people in certain industries that communicate in a particular way. Like if you're a pilot of an aircraft, there's a way you communicate.
Interesting point. That's very official. You actually go. it's almost ratified and written down and in a dictionary somewhere. This is
Yeah.
what you do. And it's a protocol. It's like a legitimately ratified protocol. And I
Exactly.
think that's
Because
great, right?
if you get communication wrong and something happens, people die essentially.
Yeah.
So that's why, yeah, there is a standard way. And there is also, and it also comes down to things like just having a standard way of discussing things. I know what I often say with my family sometimes is that whenever we have a discussion and I haven't, and I have been told, no, it's the word assume. So I don't like it when people would say, oh, but I just assumed you would know how to do it, or I just
Yeah.
assumed you would know to do something. And it's like, well, no, if you didn't say for me to do it, I'm not going to assume. Maybe I just spend too much.
Yeah.
Maybe I just spend too much time in code that unless it's told to me, I'm not going to do
I'll
it.
tell you what, I find that absolutely amazing sometimes, that living in a world of working with lots of coders and lots of developers where coding is such a communication skill. Like if you get it wrong, you get a syntax error and you get a bug, and that's logically, and you've got to be so clear and explicit in your code. Yet we also seem to be the same bunch of people that as soon as you turn around and talk to a person, we don't edit, we don't syntax check, we do barely run a spell checker and just rough stuff and go, it's all right, they'll figure it. And okay, maybe I'm like, but that's my developer brain, right? I read it and go, syntax error, compile failure. I've got no idea what you're talking about. And I just find that ironically hilarious that it's sort of used to be a thing, right? Back in the, let's say, early 2090s, that developers weren't good people. And
Yes.
it's like, I find that quite amazing, because like, isn't coding inherently a language-based skill? Like, we should be
Yeah,
the
it
best
is.
communicators of all. Should be able to be very
Absolutely.
clear and because we're talking about communication, there's always those things about like great communicators are great listeners.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting here thinking about that as I read a issue queue. It's like, but it's very difficult to listen when I don't comprehend.
Yeah.
So it's just a point of friction. That's probably the best way I'm big on removing friction. Our jobs are hard. They are. Developing this stuff's hard. Things take time. You're doing trial and error, trying to resolve bugs and stuff. And when you've got the friction of trying to then compute and comprehend other stuff, I find it a cognitive overload that I'd rather not have.
Yes.
And then
Absolutely.
so that's what I mean. And that's part of this podcast is connecting with people having similar experiences and try and spread this. I love that phrase from today, that culture of clarity. Like, be clear. It's and we do a great job. Like there are so many things like templates. I mean, they're fantastic. I mean, how would the issue queue be if we didn't have templates to break down? You're exactly what you spoke about before with the, show me how to reproduce it. And there's a lot of these things we know, yet I feel like there's a culture of once you've done the basics and the simple stuff, then it doesn't matter. We got better things to do. And I kind of tend to, what I'm advocating for is, I think your communication and being clear is probably the most important thing. 100%.
Yes.
Right. I think, you could be the worst coder in the world, but if you can communicate clearly, you're winning.
That is true. Yeah, because you think about the work that we do, doesn't matter what technology stack you are using. If you cannot understand the problem, and this comes back to communicating what the problem is, it just makes your job so much harder. But if you have a clear understanding of what the problem is, then you can easily explain how to fix the problem. If you can explain how to fix the problem or implement a feature, then the coding part's the easy part. It's figuring out the problem. And this is where I come back to a lot, where our jobs as developers isn't to write code. It is to solve problems and understanding those problems. And that's why it comes down to communication. Most of the problem is communication. And if your team, and if you're working in a team that's struggling to ship things, struggling to meet, I don't know, expectations, I can guarantee that the way the features are planned, the way the meetings are structured, perhaps, or it's really got nothing to do with the quality of the developers or the stack. Or it can sometimes be a terrible choice of technology, but a lot of the times it can be just not having clarity, not understanding. And if you're dealing with the thing is though, somebody has to guide the product, and the product can be the website, can be anything.
Yep.
So you always have that communication barrier. You're going to have it just if you have to implant it, your ideas from one brain to another. Unfortunately,
Yeah, it's never going to be
not
perfect.
Yeah, exactly.
Never.
And unfortunately, it's not like the Matrix yet. Well, who knows? We can just plug things in and you understand it. So you're always going to have that. And how many times I know a few times it's happened with me where I show it and they're like, oh, but does it do this? I thought it's like that. I assumed it's going to work like this. And then I was like, well, this is the first I've heard of this functionality. Oh, but I thought if we build it this way, I just assumed it's going to work this way. Well, no.
Yep.
And that's where you can really struggle.
It's a real art. And I think that's what I'm advocating for. I understand it's an art. One thing I want to bring up also in our community in particular, there's a lot of people where English is their second language and we happen to speak English.
Yes.
So they're at a disadvantage already, which on two fronts, that means that's one more reason to not be laissez-faire about your communication. You need to, make an effort. And they're probably the people who are making the most effort. It's the native English speakers are the ones that aren't editing what they write. But also, so that's more reason to be clear and make clarity. But it's also when there are people who aren't very good English speakers, when something's vague and using idiomatic language and things like words like shenanigans, it's just going to throw somebody.
Yeah.
Right. And so what I'm advocating for, I think, because communication is such an important thing, and we're all so bad at it, I like to advocate for prioritize it. Like that's and again, not just from a point of trying to keep everybody happy and not annoy people, and because it's the feeling I got from a lot of what I read on the communication etiquette was how to not be annoying, and it's like, well, no, that's not where I'm advocating for that's like a negative way to look at it. How to not be annoying. It's like, let's advocate for how to be clear.
Yes.
And it's hard, and no one's ever got it. But that's. I mean, I tell you what, I was looking at 6 months ago, looking at a job ad, and I applied for a job, and the email comes around, and I'm reading the response from this guy, and I got halfway through the first sentence and said, "I'm not going any further." So this guy can't communicate. He's lost me in the first sentence. I just straight up went, no, I'm not going any further, because if this is the person I've got to work with on a daily basis and the first paragraph they ever sent me, I can't comprehend it. What's the point? Right? I just called it. So it's really quite important. And then, so I want some of the things you touched on, I think might be one of the reasons I like Agile a lot. Everyone talks about Agile so much, but it's never seemed to be a lot of the structures around Agile are communication based.
Yes.
You do a stand up in the morning for 10 minutes. The way you got the structure of delivery. What did you do yesterday? What are you going to do today? What are your blockers? It gives you a framework to work from to produce clarity among the team. You have your regular retros, which helps get clarity, helps spread the information and keep everybody clear and on the page. I've never seen it obviously called out, but I'm thinking of it now. I go, gee, a lot of those, especially in Scrum, for example, is structured for clarity. User stories, the way you write a user story is designed to be clarity. And I bring this up in a bit to segue to something you brought up for me. Of course, when talking user stories, you got this wonderful user story that's got a title and a description and I don't know the format of a user story. I've not, as a developer, when I do what I expect to see, blah sort of thing, and you give it a title. And we discussed this today. Like, you got an issue where the login form's throwing an error when you put an exclamation mark in it or something like that, right? And then you're the one that brings up, you get into a stand up and someone goes, how you going with issue number 56439? Great, thanks.
Exactly.
I know you brought that one up, and that's. I wondered if you wanted to speak to that a bit. That's one of my. You mentioned it to me, and I'm like, that's one of my number one gripes.
Well, the thing is, in any form of communication, if you're dealing with tickets, of course, it's easier if it's in a written form. Always link to the ticket. So I often get messaged through Teams or Slack or whichever chat your company's using, and also emailing as well. And you'll be surprised how often people just chuck in ticket numbers. And the thing for me is that it's so much easier just to grab the actual URL and chuck it in there, because then I can click on it and give you feedback instantly. If not, think about this. First of all, you're breaking my concentration, which I do want to mention. Just, instant chat is a good for work, or isn't it for communication? But you're breaking my communication. I either need to open up a browser, I need to go into Jira, because 9 times out of 10, everyone's using Jira these days. Then I need to grab that little bit, that key, that ticket number, chuck it into the browser and see exactly what it is. Or you just put the URL in the chat or the email, and that just makes life so much easier. Click on it straight away, and I can give you clarity. Because I know sometimes I might get contacted directly, but also when you're doing hybrid work, okay, what I mean hybrid work is when you're chatting to somebody over, say, Teams or something, or even Google Meet. I always link to a ticket if I'm talking about it, because often people will be like, hey, Ivan, can you look at ticket blah, 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 blah. I saw that you're working on ticket 1123. And then straight away I'm like, okay, stop, wait. Can I just bring up the ticket? Do you have a link to the ticket? No, I don't. Okay. Whereas when I talk to people, I straight away say, look, I have been working on this ticket that you've worked on. Here's a link to the ticket. And straight away they can click on it. I give them a moment, because with me, it's like, as soon as I've finished working on a ticket, if it's been a couple of days, it's out of my head. I'm pretty bad at forgetting projects. I don't know how people remember projects from 6 months ago.
But I don't know how. I know some people have like eidetic memories, and they remember every damn little thing, and it's like, I don't. Like, help me out. But I tend to overcompensate there too. Oh, actually, I don't know if I think I'm perfectly clear. Like, when I'm communicating a ticket and I want to do, I'll go to the trouble as the author of the message to go get the ticket, to get the title, to put the title in there, to grab the link, to link it, right? So how are you going with ticket? Like we said before, how are you going with the issue with the exclamation mark working in the progress bar? Here's a link to the ticket. Here's the ticket number. I like to include the ticket number. I'd rather we didn't communicate with them, but then it also avoids ambiguity. If there happens to be another login issue, you click on the link and you know exactly.
Yes, ticket
solves
numbers.
That confusion.
Ticket numbers are important.
Yep. But they're not for, that's, I've used the example before. My name's Bevan. It's not 04196552. Like, no one refers to me by my phone number. Like that's because humans don't speak in numbers. And that's you bringing up the issues. I've been in so many stand-ups where you come in the morning and they go, what'd you do yesterday? And it's, I worked on 15642, and then I worked on 2454. I got stuck with 5431, and then on 674, I'm going to hand that over to Bevan because he was working on 654. And you're just like,
I don't know what I was working on. I was working on a ticket. I can check if I open up my laptop, but
I might not even remember the title, but I can describe what it was, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Which is so much more valuable. And I think we're touching on that. That's that clarity, I'm just ringing. I shared this with you the other day. I've got this. I bring it up all the time when I go to. There's a place called wallskills.com. I think you go to wallskills and you search for communication. You got this one for how to write emails well. It's got some great stuff in there for purpose, whether it's information request, a clear sender or receiver stuff. But one of my favorite ones is don't waste other people's time.
Yeah.
Right. Which is one, but the one I've got to learn from some of these myself, right? Is keep it short. I'm terrible at. I'm terrible at keeping it short. Keeping it simple, I can be terrible at that. But number 3, Google it for them. All right. And I love the example it uses. Provide all necessary links, paths the files, etc. This way, only you hit Google Maps to find out what the route to the location is, not each and every one of your 40 recipients. And I think that's just,
yes,
you can go and look it up. You can put the link in there. If you send it out to 40 people, and then that's 40 people have to go and open up the browser, type the address in, look it up. They're like, it's just so easy just to make that little bit of extra effort and save so much time. I think that's, I love reading this thing because that's like, they don't waste people's time. 3 of the things, 2 of them I'm terrible at. And number 1, I'm over the top. Like I put links in all the time. And I do. When I'm writing a message, I spend the time to sit there, and it's like things like Jira. I'll open up Jira. I'll go find the ticket, and I'll copy the title in. Unless I love things when you're using Slack, for example, and you paste the link, and it just goes, and which only works if it's open and you're connected to it. But where it goes, it gets the title. It happens in the Slack channel for Drupal. You post an issue queue in there, and it goes boom. Here's the title and here's the description, and then you don't need to worry about it. You can just go.
Yes,
boom, boom, boom.
absolutely. And there are,
Great.
you can easily sort out technology to handle it for you, but most of the time it's not set up.
Yeah. One of the other things I've seen, what's now an example where you've got someone's brought up an issue, and this has been in working internally, right? And you go, refer to such and such an email thread to find out that, and you go, okay, I've got to find out what's going on. And you open it up, you're scanning through it, and you think, and you see things like, so it was important that we got it done tomorrow. You're like, right. I open up the email. What date was it? And, I can't find what the date was. And it's just things like that. And then and this is probably the experience, having come up against that before, where I've just spent so much time just having to research what date something was written on because somebody said today or tomorrow, instead of writing the whole date. And I'll go over the top. I'll write Wednesday, the 23rd of January, 2018. Like, what day is it? Like that's because if somebody wants to know, it's there, because this is my issue. I struggle so bad with ambiguity and things being vague that I overcompensate and make things very, very, very clear. But I think it's just that wonderful thing. When the communication is hard, and I think that's because communication's hard. I want to advocate for make it important. Like that's.
Yes,
we're communicating. That's the make it important, make it easy for people, and that's and then we're looking at something like Drupal. We want to advertise Drupal. When someone comes in and there's what seemingly a very easy thing to solve has just been stalled for ages, and you're trying around, you're bamboozled with all this confusing stuff. People, it's like we're not doing our community any favors by not being clear when we could be, and it's just rampant. It's not a mandate on Drupal at all. This happens all the time, right? Happens everywhere. Happens on social media. You get misunderstood. People aren't clear. You don't understand what they're talking about. I know I've been in situations, you're talking on social media and someone says something and you respond to them, and then you realize that they meant the exact opposite of what they said. Of course, they were quoting something, but they didn't put it in quotes. That sort of thing.
Social media is a whole other thing. Like,
but I just mean to say that human communication in general. That's what I'm saying. Is such a hard thing, and I think that's one of it's a skill, like as we said, and it's a skill I've been big on learning, and that's probably why I get frustrated a bit, because I put so much effort into learning how to communicate and be clear. I get really pissed off when everybody else is there. And, and when I say everybody else, I mean a lot of people. That's what I mean by like that. There's just, and people try, and that's, I swear there's got to be something wrong with me, right? I just don't deal with it very well when people aren't clear. and other people do. And that's I suspect it's not. I suspect other people have these challenges too. Like it's very hard to explain what I mean when I say I don't understand what you mean. Like it's not
Yes.
the subject matter I'm confused by. It's your language.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah.
Well, chances are now people just are going to ignore you now because they're
Oh
like,
yeah.
"Oh, Bivens, if I don't explain it perfectly to him, he's not going to understand." No, I'm joking. No, no, no.
Yeah.
No,
Well,
true,
I've
true.
mentioned. I think I mentioned it in the last podcast, and I've said it a few times. This is a war I will never win.
No.
You know.
Well, that's the thing. It's like as you've been saying, communication is hard in general. Now, social media has just tipped that upside down. Let's now limit you to how many characters is Twitter now? 280
I
or
don't
something? Oh
know.
no, sorry,
Not
no. But it
enough.
used to be, 140, and now it's 280 because I know now that I kind of
Yeah.
struggle when I put out my short form content. Twitter's always the lowest, and it's very annoying for me.
I'm the same. That's probably my big reason why I never got into Twitter or X now, and I'm
Yeah,
still not into it
because
just because I missed the boat. Because for a long time, and this is a really good example of how like verbose I can be. It's like Twitter. I'm gonna run out of characters. I, but
yeah, exactly.
by Twitter, like it's like I
Yeah.
can't. I
Well,
write pages. Like I write essays.
well, you could
Um,
write threads. That's the workaround for that. That's what I do. But you're pretty much doing 280 characters per tweet. And
yeah,
so what I do is I break things up into like 4 or 5 threads. And hey, it
yeah.
works.
I mean,
Yeah.
I really like to admit because I complain about all this clarity a lot, but I like to admit I know I got flaws. I know on the
Oh
other end
yeah.
of done a lot of work on working out my personality type and doing a lot of self exploration for years. And one of the great phrases came up to describe that my communication style is the saga, which I think is a great way to do.
The
Because
what? Sorry?
I'll
The
tell you
saga.
the saga. Yeah,
I've
so.
never heard of this personality trait. Like,
Oh, yeah, so that's when, sort of I just give you all the information, all of it, including, it's like, "Oh, I've got this bug."
oh.
So a bit of background information. When I was 4, this happened,
It's
No,
like, can you
uh,
start? It's like, can you start from the beginning? From
yeah.
the beginning? Yes, from
Once
the
upon a time.
beginning. Okay. Well, the universe used to be a cold and dark place, and then
Yeah, and that's, context, right? 'Cause and that really
yeah.
explains why it's an art, and I tend to think most people probably err on the other side, where they tend to leave context out.
Mm,
I tend to put way too much in. Because I want it, like
yeah.
that's because your screenshot ones is a great example. The number of times I've received screenshots and it's like no context,
Yes.
like that's and this I could sit here and give my big list of rules that I collect on the always include your URL, don't use words like this,
Yeah.
always link to things like I
Yeah.
could probably should sit down one day and just write a list.
You
Just
should
like
actually
just
write
audit it.
the manifesto, the Bevan like communication manifesto. Who
Yeah,
knows? It will probably
yeah.
become
How to
popular. And then it'll
someone
always
will
be
like.
linked at, just like the Agile Manifesto.
No, but the problem is when you sit down and write a big manifesto on how to write properly, someone goes through and points out all your grammatical and spelling errors.
Oh, who cares?
No, but that's what always happens. You sit there and you go, "This is how to communicate clearly." Someone's going, "I don't understand what you said."
Yeah.
And
Well, that's
it's the
it.
way it is. That's the way it is.
Okay. So what about chat? What are your thoughts on using Slack in the workplace?
I think we tend to disagree on this one. I'm huge on communication. I find it great for bonding and team. I'm a talky person. I like to
Yeah.
talk. Um, Similarly, I've been in the same boat where we got an internal chat channel and I'm stuck and possibly in crisis. And you go in the chat and you're like, help, and I'll obviously be clearer than that. But then half an hour later, there's no help. So you're like, okay, so I've done a bunch of research and now context has changed because I haven't heard anything back in the past half an hour. So I've done the research. So here's what I've done in the last half hour. right? So then you're still waiting and there's still no one comes back. So another half hour later, you go, okay, it's changed again. I've found out all this other stuff. I was wrong in the first place, but this is here. So you're right. And then by the time someone comes back, here they are with a whole book full of stuff. They're like, I don't know what's going on. What's Bevan? What's happening? I like to have chat and I like people to be on it so that when I ping out and go, hey, emergency, let's get together. I love to come in the mornings and put a good morning chat. And a lot of teams do that. You come in the morning and there's some people that are just great at it. You come in, there's the same person saying good morning every morning, which, I guess it's like that. When you tell someone you love them all the time, it loses its meaning if it's what you do every day. But I like it. I like to make the effort to every morning. Hi, I like to, especially when these days where we're hybrid and remote, I particularly like to have that chat open and connect. I know we'll go back to the Drupal Slack again. There's some people in there we tend to not just talk.
Yeah.
Right. Stuff that might not, I think there are different kinds of people. Some people like to keep it for solving problems. I like to bond, like I like to connect with people. It's like, what do you think about this? How do you see it? I find in chat a lot. I'll give you a great example. I don't know where we are with using names on this stuff, but someone we both know and people will know because if they saw the story, they'll make the connection. But posted something about Drupal Steward. When's that going end of life? Thinking it'll go end of life with Drupal 7. And I'm like, I don't know what Drupal Steward is. So I made a comment, gone and looked up Drupal Steward. Now I know what Drupal Steward is. It's great. And it turns out they go, oh, I'm an idiot. It's got nothing to do with Drupal 7. It's still alive anyway. And it's like, but I'm so glad you came in and made that mistake, right? Because I learned something.
Yeah.
It's right. So I tend to, and I like having conversations because there was one where we had a stream the other day, a long stream of back and forth and ripping a bit because there was a few assumptions we were making that I wasn't sure were correct and the way things were going. Well, going in the context of what was it? It's just a coding style thing. There's a thing in Drupal to what you can do in a constructor. All right. And a couple of us chatted for a very long time till in the end. I'm like, okay, right, I get it now. And very much want to sit down and write a blog post about exactly what I learned and what's the state of it, because I find it really interesting. I'm fascinated. I find it fascinating and I learned something. And I think there were people who are like, this is so not important. Why are we talking about it? And it's like, well, because we're all different. I think it's extremely interesting. So I like chat. I think there's a lot of benefit to learning and, you find out about stuff. Expand your context. I know what Drupal Steward is now. I understand how to code better because I've explored that and pulled it apart. And now I know why not to call, what is it? The entity manager, why not to load entity storage in a class constructor. And I learned a lot about coding styles and solid principles and stuff. Of course, I was like, it doesn't seem to fit. It doesn't. So we pulled it back. And now I kind of get why we do it and understand it. And it's like I feel like I can then go to the issue and sort of write it up now and go, this is the state of it. This is why the decision, because it's not very clear, right, on the issue. It's just like, we're doing this. Of course, it's a performance problem. But why? Right. And now I understand why. Right. And it's very clear. And I think it was very valuable. I think, plus the bonding, there's people I was chatting to who I'm now closer to and know them better. I think there's benefits for that. And I know a lot of people get distracted. I've been in workplaces where I've been asked, can you turn your notifications off because your notifications are distracting me? And you're like, okay, fine. I turn my notifications off. And then later on they go, why didn't you do such and such? I go, do what? And they go, well, sent you a message. My notifications are on. Right? I think my focus is a thing. Like I need distraction myself. Like I need that distraction to get away. Someone spoke about this the other day about where were we talking about the idea of, maybe it would have been in Slack channel. Someone brought it up about when you're stuck on a problem and you just can't solve it, go home, go and sleep on it. And I find that's part of my creative process. Is I'm working on something, a bit stuck, go and have a chat, come back. Oh, right. right? So I find that value, whereas I'm very aware there are other people who are the exact opposite, and they just need to focus
Yeah.
and go in a room. And that's the stitch that ties back to, I'm sitting here going, hi, the room's on fire. They're like, and they got the blinkers on, because I'm focused on solving my problem. And but the building's on fire.
Yes. Yeah.
So there's um, I don't know exactly how to deal with that one. That's because there are two different kinds of people.
Well, that's it. You have the like I think when it comes down to personality, you and I are different, but we work well together. You're you are a
Yeah.
lot more vocal in the Slack, whereas with me, I find it I, I find it exhausting, which is kind of funny because
Right.
because so much mental
Extrovert,
no,
introvert. Yeah.
well, you know me, I don't like labels because I can be an introvert when I have to be, and I can be an extrovert when I have to be.
Yeah, I know.
But it all comes down to often I see people just sit down and they're just able to write out whatever comes into the head. And you really need to be a lot quicker in writing things down when you're in, say, instant, like, like Slack or something, compared to writing a blog post. I think the mindset is probably a little different. Whereas with me, I just spew garbage out half the time, and then I go in there and finesse it. And the whole thing about writing it, I have to get the sentences right. I have to get
I
everything
love doing
right.
that.
And so many times you don't understand. And we've probably brought this up.
Yeah.
So many times I've written a paragraph and then I delete it thinking I don't want to waste people's time. I need to
I've
look at
done
it
that
again.
1,000 times.
Yeah.
I've
And
done that a
so
million times.
for me, I don't know. Like, I've always been a lurker in in every community that I've been in. I've always been a kind of this person that kind of lurks, but that's like 99.9% of people that use platforms where when they're not creating content. I'm trying to change, and I'm trying to do that purely as a professional thing where I am trying to write more short form content. I'm trying to do the LinkedIn thing. Today I even started liking posts on LinkedIn. Normally I don't do that, and I kind of felt it's like, ugh, that
Yeah.
kind of feels disgusting. But at the end of the day, it's like I'm playing to the algorithm. That's like
Yeah,
I've kind of given in. It's like, all right, fine,
Yeah.
I have to, it's like, don't hate the player, hate the game. And maybe I do need to spend more time. But the thing with me is that I don't know how people can work at the same time and have Slack opened up. I and I'm not just saying Drupal Slack. I'm just saying, like, even
Yeah.
the company Slack. I don't know how people do that.
Yeah. Whereas I'm the opposite. I don't know how you can sit there in a quiet room. I'd go nuts. There's some of the
Well, you're not in a
environments
quiet
people work.
room for like hours. You're like concentrating for an
No, but
hour. Then
I
you
like
get up
I
and you're
find I
like
can't focus for long stretches at a time. I need like every 5-10 minutes to get up and distract and come back. I focus in short bursts.
5 to 10 minutes. No,
Yeah,
I
no,
need to find that
see, yeah,
vein. Like, it's kind of like finding that vein of gold where you find that
well,
flow for a
it,
bit.
I tell you what. That's having said that, there are some times when something like I swear I sound just like bloody all the ADHD reels you see on until I find my hyperfixation and I'm like, right, I know, right, that's, I think it depends. If it's something that really piques the interest and I want to find out what this is, it's suddenly the opposite. You can't get me off it,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Oh,
Bevan, and what? Sorry, I was deep in this thing. Whereas if I'm not in that groove, um, you know, sometimes when you're doing that repetitive stuff, that's not a challenge. It's not a solving thing. You just one after the other. You're like 1,
yeah, the
2,
repetitive
3,
stuff.
4. So, I'll tell you what. I gotta say one thing that gets me with the focus, and I think it's a very Drupal-y thing, is the amount of times that you'll change something and then you might need to clear the cache or wait for the page to go, and you're like press the button and you're like waiting. And you're like, oh, maybe I should work on something else. Okay, you go work on something else. The next thing you know, you spent an hour on something else, and you come and cleared it again, right? And you go, oh, I just lost so much time, right? I struggle with that in when, especially when you're trying to repeat something and you just, it's like make a line of change code. It takes you about 10 seconds, and then you wait 5 minutes for it to load or something.
That is true. I've actually thought about this a lot, especially because I've worked on websites where we have a build system and also testing where you have testing. So whenever you're in the process of running tests, that can take sometimes 5 minutes. And that's more than enough. Maybe, well, if you're clearing your cache and then you're getting distracted, you need to figure out what the problem is with your local site, because that's running too slow. That's the first thing. That's the first thing. Maybe look at DDev or no, actually, but you use Linux, so it's not like a Mac Docker problem like I have to do.
See, I'm curious. This is one of the things. Is that just me? Because that's been my entire career. It's always
for me
slow.
It's testing. Whenever I'm dealing with some type of thing where I need to deploy it to QA or deploy it to staging, and there's like a 5-minute deployment process, or like you're writing tests and then you need to run it to see the feedback. That's where I'm like, waiting. It's, oh crap, I need to go do something else.
I've read this in, when you read about test-driven development and stuff. The whole point is to remove that. You've got to get down to a fast development cycle.
Oh yeah,
and
absolutely.
This is why this ties into the communication, because it's reducing the friction. Mm-hmm. It's one of the things I love about Scrum, from the idea of a Scrum Master. One of the ways I've seen it described. What's the name of that sport where they it's a bit like bowling, but you got that round thing that you go shooting down you sort of slide it and it doesn't roll. It's a round spaceship type thing, and the guy stands in front of it with the broom.
It's on the ice, right? Like, what's it called?
It's on ice.
Yeah, it's called yes. What is it? Ice bowling? No, it's called. It's not.
I don't know if it is on ice. Yeah, the thing, but and the guy runs in front of it with the broom, polishing the ground right in front of it to make it go faster.
Curling. That's what it's called. Curling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of that. Like, that's kind of that idea. And I feel like Agile and Scrum's very much designed to reduce that friction, get it out of your way so your developers can just get their job done, right?
Yes.
We opened with this. Our job's to get in there and solve problems. I want to solve the problems I'm hired to solve, not the 1,000 problems around that one, just to get to it, right?
Exactly.
And it's got to be so inefficient and costing people. But then again, here we are in IT, and we're swapping time for money. And so when the projects take a long time, you make more money. I think there's some people, it's in their best interest for things to be slow, because you can charge a lot more. Like, it's repeat business.
And that is why we use Drupal and rebuild the sites every 5 years. There's a new version of Drupal, have to rebuild it again.
Yeah, I tell you what, there's a catch to that though, because I know I've learnt myself very well that in my head I'm always going for the get rid of the friction. I don't want to be distracted by all these other things. And then when you finally get rid of the friction, it's like, oh, now I don't have those distractions I enjoy so much.
That's true.
Yeah, I did it. We talk about building that course I'm building at the moment. When I first started playing with cameras, trying to get cameras to work up, looking up DSLRs, trying to get them running on Linux, running the right drivers, buying the cables, getting the lighting set up, and when I finally got it set up, it's like, right, now I can get in and get stuck in and just start making videos. And you're like, I kind of realized I really enjoyed that, as frustrating as it was, right? The whole time it's like, this is exhausting. This is so frustrating. A problem after problem after problem after problem. And once I got it all lined out, I'm like, hey, it's a bit boring, isn't it? Like that. So, it's a catch-22.
Do you know why though? Because this is one thing I have realized. If I have a clear, and this is something that I learned doing Agile training, and this blew my mind, the definition of done. I never heard that before.
Yeah, I learned it through Agile.
And I learned it at Agile training. And as soon as And mind you, I did agile training after being a developer for like probably 7 years. And I always had this struggle, like this thing in the back of my head where it's like, you don't know if it's what they want. And then as soon as I heard this definition of done, I was like, hell yeah, that's it. That's it. Like that is an awesome term. I love that. And one thing
It's a really nice structure to help with, again, communication.
Exactly.
Is this done?
Exactly.
Nope.
Because how many times do you have discussions or arguments about, well, you know, oh, I thought it was meant to work like this. Why isn't it working like this? It's like, well, that's not the definition of done. Now, that coming back to that feeling, okay, that you were saying how where you really enjoy it. I have learned, and this is just being nearly in my mid 40s soon, old, is that if I work on a task that has a clear definition of done, for me, it's much easier to focus on because it's kind of like my subconscious knows that there's an end. With creating courses, and I've mentioned this before, I suck at creating courses. Like, yes, I've been doing videos and all that, but it's a very long slog. You know, it's a long process for me to the point.
A lot longer and harder than I expected. Yeah,
exactly. Like it is a hard process. You first need to figure out what you're going to write about. Oh no, sorry, what you're going to do the course about. Then you need to structure it. Then you go through that iteration multiple times. Then you either script it. Then you script it. Then you record it. And then at every single interval, it's like, yeah, you feel like you're doing it, but you haven't done it yet. Like you feel great. Then you record it. Then Drupal comes along and changes versions. And then all of your video, and this has happened to me 3 times, all of your videos are out of date because they decided to update the CK editor or they decided to make Claro.
I was talking about that today. Evergreen content. You know,
Claro's now the new backend theme.
Here's my tutorial, and the best things about Drupal 10. It's obsolete already before I finished
exactly.
it.
Exactly. Yep. And then you've recorded videos 2 months ago. Then you need to edit them. That's a slow process. And then after all of that, nobody buys them. And you need to then, and then you need to, well, sorry, I don't want to discourage you. But that's the thing. Then you
my
realize
creative expression. That's what I'm building it for love.
But then you realize that, oh, I need to market this thing. And then you're torn between, do I spend time producing the content or do I spend time promoting the content? And that's one thing that I've kind of struggled with a lot, to the point where the framework that I have now with creating content is really focused around marketing it first. That's why I've been doing my live streams. And if people want to know more about it, this is a free plug. I do live streams on Thursdays. Anyway, jump on my LinkedIn, you'll see it. But
I got to join that. So,
but the thing is, though, I've come up with a nice workflow to have a definition of done in my head, so that no matter what, I go live 9 p.m. Sydney time on Thursdays, no matter what. And that's it. And it goes live. And the only thing I do after the fact is I trim the ends because I set up the stream, and I can do that. But it goes to like 5 platforms. And now what I'm going to do in the process, again, having that definition of done, having that clear communication, well, with yourself really, but having that clear definition to then produce the free content. I'm just going to cut up the long live streams into shorter things, and I'm in the process of doing that.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. But for me, I realized, and this came down to having that specific, being as specific, and it's so obvious. But I know that, and I'll let you jump in, but I'll just mention this final thing.
So keep going.
When it comes to like in my professional career, I love the type of work that I absolutely love is bugs. For some reason, I love it when I can replicate the bug. So that's the first thing. As soon as I get a ticket saying there's a problem and it's a bug, I'm like, ooh, nice.
Oh, wow.
As soon as I can replicate it as well, I'm like, okay, cool. And I can spend 8 hours going down the depths of Drupal, where I've put in breakpoints at like every single negotiator, manager, repository service, whatever you want to call it. and I will be not yelling at my computer, but I will sometimes be like just all like stressed out. But it's like an
I
enjoyable
know that
process
experience.
where I go deep down, and then once I figure it out, it's like hell yeah. But it always goes through multiple iterations where I think I figured it out, but I haven't. I need to go through like
Oh,
3 ways. It's kind of like, do you remember the TV show House?
yes.
Yes. Okay. Those TV episodes were always the same. A patient will come in with a problem that was unsolvable. House would always fix it up the first time, never get it right, and then at the end, in the last 5 minutes, the second time, he fixes it. Okay, or he
Yeah, I think
helps the
that's
patient. It's always the same thing. So with me, it's like, okay, I'll fix this problem up. I know it's going to be broken again, and then what I try and do is I fix the bug. I make sure I can fix it. Then I try and break it to make sure that I have fixed it. And sometimes I'm like, okay, I can't re-replicate it. Why not? Why can't I do that? And that just gnaws in my head to the point where I can stay up till like late at night.
I've done that too.
But
Yeah.
it only happens with bugs. If
Oh,
I have to
see,
work on a task, I'm
yeah.
like if I need to write a blog post by like 9 p.m. at night, I'm like half
Oh,
asleep writing a
interesting.
blog post. And I just cannot focus. So it's kind of
It's
like these funny things.
It's funny. I have
Yeah.
done that with bugs. Just thinking as you talk, there's one thing I don't like fixing bugs. Yet I tend to be good at it because it's kind of that's the work that gets thrown at me all the time.
Yeah.
Right? In all my career, it seems to be here, Bevan, do fix this, fix this, fix this, fix this, fix this,
Here's a hard
fixing,
problem,
fixing,
fix it
fixing,
up.
fixing, 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 fixing. And it's like, I want to create something. That's probably partly why I'm so into building this course at the moment.
Yeah.
I'm creating something. I'm a creative person. I like to create things, but I happen to be very good at digging in and fixing bugs because the same thing. I'll lock on it and I'll focus and get in there and get it done. And I love doing that. But then just saying a blog post, I'm not so good at. Depends, right? I think, and actually, I know what it depends on. It's clarity. We mentioned that before about if you've got clarity, it's, I don't need certainty. Certainty is an interesting, it's I'm uncertain about what the thing is. I don't know what the problem is. I don't know what the bug is. I don't know what this is exactly going to look at. But if I'm clear, I know what end result you want. I know what it's got to get to. I'm clear on the next step is if it's just the ambiguity. If we're looking at something, okay, I've got 3 different choices about how to approach this. I'm like, but when the next step is rather quite obvious, I can get quite motivated because you can get another flow and go, right, this step, next. When I lose clarity, I start to get, see, I'm doing it right now. Like I've just lost without clarity. But I love you talking about we're talking about the definition of done. I've mentioned to you a few times I want to do a chat about the Cult of Done manifesto, which I think was a big thing in 2012, long time ago, which I only just discovered. I happened to watch a YouTube video about it recently. Someone called Bree Pettis released it, and it's just a list of about 13 different things about done, where there are 3 states of being: not knowing, action, and completion. Things like that. There's I love these things like accept everything as a draft. It helps to get it done. Like there's no editing stage. I just love these ideas, and they so apply to just this. It ties in with the definition of done. Just that a lot of things. Like the point of being done is not to finish, but to get other things done. Once you're done, you can throw it away, right? It's kind of I've been carrying this through my life recently since I discovered it. Just this idea of, especially when I'm building the course, like you go, I've got a session and I'm going to open it up and I need to review the script. Okay, I've reviewed the script. It's done. Right, now I've got to record the screen share. Right, it's done. Now I've got to talk to the camera for a bit. Done.
Yeah.
Right. Now, and I just love that. Done. This idea of just get it done. And they go, is it perfect? No, but it's done. Right. And then I've recently been fascinated by that, how it's been able to just move it forward and drop that perfectionism it's not about getting it perfect. It's about getting it done. And it's quite, of course, perfectionism is a killer. which is
Oh,
probably what, when I talk about that,
absolutely.
go back to the communication that we're talking about. When I'm trying to do perfect communication, you end up overdoing it. There is there's these two ends of this spectrum, right? Where I think I'm butting up against a lot of people who are just down on their, I do call it sneezing on the page. I think some people communicate that way. There's like, I've got an idea in my head. Here's the thing. Here, go do that. And you're just like, what? No idea. Whereas I'm on the other end of the spectrum and kind of end up just editing and reviewing what I'm writing so much that by the time I've got it, it's just this huge big thing of no one's going to read all that, right? Though I've learned over the years to do things like put your TLDR at the too long didn't read bit at the start, break it down to a few bullet points, and then I can just put all the other information down the bottom if someone wants to reference it. Little skills like that you pick up over the time to adjust. It's getting onto. I do want to go through this talking about getting things done. I think it's a great topic there.
Yeah, I'm just looking at it now. Like I've heard of it, but I haven't read it before, and it is interesting. I do like this is the Medium post, right?
Yes, the one I'm reading too.
Yeah.
It doesn't go into great depth. There's an excellent YouTube video by
Okay.
a guy called No Boilerplate.
Oh,
I haven't. That's where I discovered it. It came up on YouTube. I go, "What's this thing?" I watched it and I go, "Oh, this is really interesting." And it was only like a couple of months ago. And
yeah.
he digs into each of those points in a lot more depth. Whereas this Cult of Done manifesto is literally just 13 bullet points of what done means, and I think you can read into them a lot. They're just
I
so
do
short
like
and sweet.
if you wait more than a week to get an idea done, abandon it.
Yeah,
Some things may take a bit longer, but I understand that concept. Like,
yeah,
either, spend a week on it and then decide if you're going to continue it.
yeah. I got so many things like that. I mean, if I did everything I wanted to do, I can't.
Yeah,
Right,
exactly.
because every little task that's possible, like now they're working with AI. You sit there and chat, and if I keep thinking I want to go and audit everything I've put in ChatGPT, I can't. I haven't got time. There's all these, it's kind of you just got to focus on what's the most important thing to do today. Do that. All those other things are just got to get, it's to do the most important things, and everything else is just,
Yeah, absolutely.
and that's where perfectionism will kill you. Because if you're running around getting all those little loose ends done, and that's very much recently. I've mentioned before about doing my choices every day. I've got 11 choices about my life that I that's my most number one priority every day is to go and review those choices and pick one of them and see, just reinforce on what's the end result of that. What do I want to achieve out of it, and where am I now? Just to get that orientation, and I do it every day, and that's. For a while there, it was like kind of like you need a day off. It comes up as what's your action step, and it's like go and spend some time with your family and things like that. But recently, it's been very regularly. The most important thing to do is get that course I'm working on finished. It's just that focus of it, right? And that's kind of it does. There are other distractions, and occasionally it's like you've got to go out and weed the garden or whatever. But to get that kind of clarity, getting that course finished. Is the thing. Like I've got to sit down and get a bit of it done every day, and it's just kept me moving forward, and it's great that there's some things that definition of done just came into my life and really helped with that. Not the definition of done, the Cult of Done manifesto, because that's that thing you just said, if you haven't done it within a week, throw it away, and then to contrast that course I'm working on, I work on every day. Great.
Yeah.
Keep going. Right. It's kind
Exactly.
of, yeah. So,
Okay. Well, I think that's a great place to end then.
I guess so. I believe we've done hour 18. Look at that. So fantastic. Who stayed with us throughout the talk about communication and waffling at the end?
Yeah. Well,
I
that's
feel
right.
like, sometimes I want to do a live stream here. There's so many questions I want to ask other people. We haven't got a lot of comments. I do want to put that out that I maybe should have said it earlier. I've had a few people send me direct messages from this, particularly after last week.
Okay.
I find it fascinating that I've had a few people reach me through a private message to say they related to what we talked about around imposter syndrome, and it's just like the fact that you're not saying it publicly is just kind of telling. I think, like, I'm glad they're reaching out, but that's part of why I'm here wanting to bring these things out into the light a bit,
Yeah.
because it doesn't get talked, like, it might get talked about on stage and someone do a presentation, but this is, you're sitting out there in the world and someone's sitting there going, I'm struggling with this, and if you don't say something, and I know when I bring it up and I speak to it and there's crickets, you're like, wow, I'm on my own, right? And so it's interesting that you know, maybe there's a stigma. Possibly, it's one thing I don't like. People break the stigma of this, break the stigma of that. But it's interesting that they're not. Some people have, not everybody. Some people have come out in a public chat and gone, I can relate to some of that. I'm like, fantastic, right? That's good.
Yeah.
But so, yeah, I do want to interact with our audience a bit. I want to get some feedback and I want to hear from people. If you're still here after an hour and 20 minutes,
Be careful
leave
what
some
you wish for,
comments on
man.
Hey, yeah, well, leave
Be
some,
careful.
yeah,
Well, no. So the first thing is that when it comes to live streaming, even you might get one or two people come, or maybe a few more, and which is fine. But I know recently I put in 2 polls asking for feedback,
yep,
and one on LinkedIn. Was it one on LinkedIn? No, it's like LinkedIn and Twitter and even YouTube. All those polls came at 50% each. They had 2 questions. And it's kind of like, okay, so I'll ask you the questions and you still didn't give me clarity.
there goes that clarity we talked
I
about.
know. It's like I still don't know what to do, but yeah. Because like, yeah, one of the questions was, I think on LinkedIn I put in saying, do you prefer the PDF carousels where it's like a page carousel in a PDF or video? Because I sometimes,
Right, yeah.
I spend a lot of time. The thing is though, for me to create a piece of content and then to have a PDF version of it and a video version of it is double the effort.
Yep.
But creating a PDF version, I can just put it on LinkedIn. Whereas if I create the video, then I can just do it once and spread it across all the social networks. So I want to just kind of figure out the easiest thing for me. But then I saw some algorithm thing on LinkedIn saying that those PDFs convert the best. But it's kind of like, again, it's one of these things that I'd rather get something out and a video is better than nothing. And if you're consistent with that, you're still light years ahead of somebody that doesn't do anything.
It's one of my favorite phrases is phrases, you can't steer a parked car.
Exactly.
So as long as you're doing something, you can adjust and, even if you're going the wrong way, you can do a U-turn and head off. But if you're not moving, you can't do anything. So
exactly.
So
all right, let's finish
thanks
up.
for sticking around.
Yes.
All you wonderful people that stayed till the end. We got a nice surprise for you, which is we're done.
Yes, we're done.
All right, cool. See you next week.
All right, see you later.
Ciao.